All right, back again with another episode of Bodybuilding Unleashed podcast. I am your host, Chris Santamaria, and today we're going to dive into some listener questions that we've gotten the past few weeks. All right, so we're going to get right into it. What's one belief in bodybuilding you think is completely outdated, but people still cling on to? That's kind of a tough one. I feel like a lot of clients and a lot of coaches are evolving kind of with the ages. But I think that one thing that I tend to hear when it comes to contest prep that probably would be outdated for most people is dropping sodium or even reducing sodium. Now, in some cases, this can be beneficial, but more often than not, I've seen people try to water load or drop sodium completely for a few days or reduce it, and they end up on stage looking weeks out, like 4 to 6 weeks out, and have it really backfire. So that's one of those things where I always kind of shake my head when I hear a competitor, you know, from a different team, doing something like this because it tends to be pretty risky when you're altering, your sodium, potassium, some of your water near the end. What's the biggest mistake competitors make during prep? Why does almost no coach talk about it? Okay, this is a good one. One thing that I see a lot is when people get obsessive with food. I feel like not enough coaches are talking about this problem. Now, obviously, everyone probably knows or has heard of some type of eating disorder caused in the fitness industry, which is really unfortunate because when you're in the fitness and bodybuilding community, most of us are trying to get healthier, right? Whether it's improve your lipid panel or, get to a reasonable body fat percentage, look better, feel better, perform better, right? So I feel like when some competitors go down that road, it's really unfortunate because obviously, you know, an eating disorder is very serious and we've seen it with clients, you know, over the years. I mean, I've been coaching for 23 years now, so I've seen pretty much every scenario you can imagine. And it is really unfortunate too, because when those types of people obsess over food, the telltale signs are when they're starting to stockpile their food in the cupboard, and it's just like this shrine of junk food and crap, like Halloween candy, just all this stuff, to where it almost becomes more important than the goal itself, or more important than winning a trophy or winning your pro card, right? Now, this isn't always the case. So this isn't singling out a certain group, but I always kind of thought that it was strange when people watch like the cooking shows. I never really got into that, the cooking, the baking shows, you know, kind of obsessing over all the recipes, copying down, 10 different recipes that they're going to make after the show. I never really understood that. I also didn't want the temptation either. I mean, I don't really like sweets to begin with. A lot of my clients know that. But I think in general, when people start to obsess over the food, and you can see it too. You can see it. They're posting it all over their stories. Just this outrageous, like gluttonous treats, like a cinnamon roll burger or just a 10 scoop ice cream sundae. Like that's out of control. So that's just one of the things that I see. And you can usually tell those are the types of people that are asking, "Hey, hey coach, when's my next cheat meal?" Or do I get a cheat meal this week? Again, if you take yourself outside of the box and you put your coach's hat on, you start to ask yourself, all right, what's more important? Is it the cheat meal or is it winning the show? So that's typically what I see. I also think that not a lot of coaches or, fitness figures are really talking about that stuff too. Okay. What's the biggest cycle a new client has come to you with, and what did you do? Gosh, I've seen a lot of bad cycles over the years, unfortunately, which, any experienced coach is going to know that all the drugs in the world are not going to make you the best bodybuilder. It's just not going to happen. If you don't have the genetics, if you don't have, the work ethic, if you're not checking the boxes, all the gear in the world is not going to matter. So, I had a client within the past couple years, really unfortunate, that when they came to me, you could just tell with like, kind of the red face with like the blood pressure, you know, problems with skin. You could kind of just tell when someone is just geared out, unfortunately. And this client was a male, of course. I feel like it should be obvious, but this client was a male. They were taking 2 grams of testosterone, a gram of EQ. They were taking 100 milligrams of anadrol a day, stacked with 50 milligrams of D-ball and just a slew of different peptides. I mean, it was a very expensive cycle. And immediately I said two things. Number one, we need to get off all that shit and clean out. Number two, we need to get blood work to see where everything's at, because this is running these types of numbers, you're not really going to have any longevity in the game. So, this was also a client too that had been running that amount for, gosh, it was at least 6 months or more. So, really, really poor cycle choice. We cleaned out. He did TRT for like 8 weeks. We got blood work back, and surprisingly, it was okay. And then when we had started to ramp up, I mean, we probably used like a fourth of that. And sure enough, it's no surprise to me, being a coach this long, he started to look better. He was feeling better. He started to grow better. Everything was just working. So that's one example where all the gear in the world is just not going to make a difference. All right, next one. What's your honest opinion on influencers giving prep advice when they've never coached a real athlete? Yeah, we talk about it a lot on this pod, and it's unfortunate. There's a lot of great things about social media that are really awesome. It's a great time to be alive with all this stuff, with AI, with social media, with marketing, and creating a lot of different marketing and jobs where people can make a steady income or even passive income from social media. That's a great thing, right? But when it comes to the influencers and everyone being a coach or thinking they're qualified, it's just it's total bullshit. I mean, we've said it before on the pod, like even locally, I mean, there's coaches that haven't even competed and somehow they're giving pro tips when they've never even stepped on stage. I mean, stuff like that is just it's comical to me. It's an absolute joke. It's and it goes back to anything, right? I've never golfed in my life, but I know that if I were to take golfing lessons, I'm going to hire a professional. I'm going to look at their resume, just like you do with anything. You go to your reviews, you look at the resumes, you see what a certain coach has done or a certain teacher, a certain professor, you just look at the resume. And if the resume shows that they haven't turned anyone pro, if they have no overall wins, no class wins, if they can't even get themselves in shape, I mean, the resume speaks for itself, right? How do you balance coaching, training, business, marriage, and being human with emotions without burning out? That's a really good one. You know, it does take a lot of work as a coach. Anyone that's been a coach for a reasonable amount of time that is in a relationship that does have, a professional job, maybe someone that has kids, pets, all that stuff really comes into play. And it does take a lot of work. And it's something that I've had to work on myself too with balancing and a lot of you coaches will be able to relate to this and even people that are non-coaches that are just, are in a relationship is this can become a problem, right? Whether you're scrolling, whether you're listening to a podcast, music, whatever it is, there has to be a time to where you got to set the phone down. Like you have to have some type of structure. I've always been a structured individual. I've always liked to have that structure, and I find that, we've talked about this before. I always find that someone's life will improve during a prep because it is so structured. You're getting up a little bit earlier. A lot of us are doing fasted cardio, and then it's meal one, and then it's get to your emails, go to work. So you have that regimented structure, which really helps you stay dialed in, really in all aspects of your life. So I feel like, not to go off on a tangent, but the people that structure their off season like their prep, those people are usually very successful, not only in prep, but in their jobs and their relationships as well. That's just something that I've seen. What's one thing you change in your coaching style over the last 5 years that made the biggest difference? This is a good one. I think that, I've always kind of had the coaching style to where I dive in a little bit. Sometimes I dive in a little bit too much, not as far as like crossing boundaries, but I like to know the whys. Why is it important for my client to drop 50 pounds? Why is it important to win an overall? What's that going to do for you? Why is it important to win a pro card? How is that going to change your life? So I like to kind of know some of the whys so then I can understand what got a client to this place and how we get from A to B, B being the goal as fast as possible in a reasonable amount of time. So I feel like even though I've always kind of been centered around a positive mindset, I try to help. You can't change someone's mindset really, but you can kind of help people think in a different perspective when it comes to doing the hard things. So, a lot of clients will come to me with their problems. Not a lot of like personal problems, but just general problems. Like we all get hurt. It happens. I've had a million surgeries. A lot of my listeners know this. A lot of my, friends and fans and followers already know this already. So having all those surgeries has really helped me, become who I am today and be able to lead people through those different challenges because I've been there. Trust me. I've been at rock bottom several times now, 3 times to be exact. So I know what it feels like when someone is down and out, when it seems like there's just no hope in the world. So it helps me kind of navigate, hey, all right, so, maybe you hurt your knee on leg day. It's going to be fine, trust me. Let's follow the steps to get you healthy again, and then we'll get back at it, and so forth. What's something competitors should stop complaining about because it's just part of the lifestyle? I think a lot of people they get caught up in the food once again, to where it's just like, yeah, I'm human just like everyone else. I enjoy food just as much as the next person, right? But when it comes to, and I see this especially in off season too, people forget that we are eating for performance. We're not eating necessarily for taste. So not every meal is going to be like, a chef prepared meal that you're going to sit and enjoy, an appetizer, the main course, and dessert. We're eating for performance, and we're also eating for a certain look, especially if you're stepping on stage, right? So I think people just get caught up too much as to like, oh, the food is bland and this and that. And I do see this a lot with males too. I'm not a chef, nor do I pretend to be, but I know that for a lot of people, there's a lot of different options. There's a lot of different sauces, a lot of different seasonings now that a lot of good companies, create a lot of prep friendly seasonings and sauces that are, you can totally use. The Flavor Gang being one of them. So there's a lot of different options. I think people just have to remind themselves that it's just part of the game. You're not going to enjoy every meal. Every meal is not going to be a 10 out of 10. What's the biggest red flag you see in coaches? I mean, we kind of touched on some of these. So I think a big one that most people know is coaches that aren't requiring blood work. That's a big red flag. But honestly, I think the biggest red flag is not having a resume. So if anyone goes to my Instagram or Stephanie's Instagram, I mean, coaching over 2 decades now, you can see thousands of client success, thousands of transformations. Thousands of people can't be wrong when the results are right there. So, not looking at the resume, and there's probably hundreds, even thousands of pictures I don't even have on my social media of lifestyle clients, of other competitors that have just gotten lost over the years, whether it's, that they didn't get uploaded to iCloud and this and that. You guys know what I'm saying. So, yeah, the biggest red flag is definitely not having a resume to back what they're projecting on social media. We'll flip this one. What's the biggest red flag you see in clients? We have talked about this one before. Um, there's a lot of them, but I would say the number one, the biggest red flag in clients is when you can see like there's a shift to where they don't respect you or they don't respect your judgment or your protocol. When you start to see that, it's probably it's best to do two things. You want to have a face-to-face contact, a FaceTime, something that's a little bit more personal to say, listen, what's going on? This is a team effort. It's never a dictatorship, right? Anyone that's worked with me knows that, or Stephanie. So, yeah, the biggest red flag is, definitely where you lose that respect, and the respect can still be earned. So I've had, plenty of clients over the years. They're like, Chris, why are we doing this? I don't really understand this and this. We have a conversation about it, like any professional would, any adult would. You have a conversation about it. Make sure they understand why we're doing things a certain way. There's always a reason. That's another big red flag. If your coach can't explain why they're doing a certain adjustment, that's a huge red flag. What's your take on the current state of judging in bodybuilding? Is it fair, inconsistent? Is it evolving? We've seen a lot of this locally. And I mean, locally, I can say like within Minnesota and the Midwest. I mean, we've gone to countless shows this year and the past several years. I mean, we travel almost for every single client show around the country. So, I feel like at the pro level, it's definitely a lot more fair and consistent. You see with Tyler Mannion, doing the recap and everything, which I think is helpful for a lot of people, especially people that have not been in this sport for a while. Because a lot of times you see the pictures or the video and it's like, well, you weren't there in person. It is different. Anyone that knows bodybuilding knows that it's very different from seeing a 3 second clip on social media versus actually being there. Very, very, very different story. So I think, what we tend to see that I've seen a lot this year has definitely been judging at the local level. Not every judge is qualified. Now, obviously, there are requirements to be a judge. I can't say it's that difficult, but when these judges have never been to the Mr. Olympia, have never judged a national show or pro qualifier, have never been to a national show, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. What's your perspective on PED usage becoming trendy on social media? I think it's a negative. I think it's a big negative. I think that spitting out all these ideas, these reels, these clips is a problem because it's not for everyone. Obviously, we have the natural divisions, the natural federations, but then you have a lot of up and coming competitors. You have the newcomers, and if all they're seeing, if you're 17 or 18 years old and you want to be a pro someday, you want to compete at the pro level, you want to get to that next level, and you're seeing a bunch of information and sometimes misinformation on PED usage, I think it's a problem. I think we're missing a lot of the foundation when it comes to bodybuilding. Going back to one of the first few questions, is the PEDs, while they're important on certain levels, it's not a make or break. So if someone is 18 and they see a current pro talking about their cycle or this and that, or they're using GLPs, they're using retatrutide to make prep easier, this and that, I think it's a big problem because those competitors will use PEDs as a clutch. More is better, more drugs, when in reality, that's not the way. What's the hardest part of prep that people don't realize until they're actually in it? We've talked about this briefly, and I usually see it around the 4 to 6 week mark. Is clients will start to do really, really well, and they're just killing it. They're checking all the boxes. They're looking phenomenal. A lot of them are even ahead of schedule, which most of our clients are. If you worked with us, me or Stephanie, most of our clients are ready 2 to 3 weeks out. They could step on stage at any given moment. And that's not a coincidence. So it just goes to show being a coach for that long, we have a system. We know what works. We know what's successful. We know how to create winners, right? So the problem is that when a lot of competitors get to that level, that 4 to 6 weeks out mark, male or female, when you achieve a certain level of body fat, you're going to feel like shit. Your body is not going to be performing optimally, right? Your brain function, you have brain fog, like you're forgetting things. You're putting your Tupperware in the cupboards, right? It happens. We've all been there. Being, you know, 3 to 6% body fat for males and for females being 8 to 12% body fat long term, it's not healthy, nor is it optimal. So when you get to that point, there's a shift and a lot of people start to feel shitty. I mean, you're low energy, your lifts are going down, your strength is decreasing. That's all normal. That's part of the prep because we weren't meant to be that lean for that long, right? So I think when people see the glamour, they see the pro card, they see the overall, they see the veins and the abs, they think that this is somehow going to be easy. And once you hit to that certain point, they realize that this is actually going to be some really, really hard work. There's a reason people say that bodybuilding is the hardest sport in the world, which I do believe it is, because it requires constant attention 365 days a year. It's a constant. You're either progressing or you're regressing, and if you're a holding pattern, that's fine. But once you get past that, that holding pattern, you're either going to progress or you're going to regress. So that's one of the things that I see typically. What advice would you give someone who wants to be a coach but has no real world experience? I know me and Eric have talked about this one. You have to start somewhere. Now, I think nowadays there's a lot more information available, whether it's free information. There's a ton of free information. We have free info. Go to my Instagram bio, Chris Santamaria 198. There's literally a free champions guide. You can click on it. It's like 20 pages. It's free info. Use it by all means. Comment. Let me know what you think. There's a lot of free information. Now, there's a lot of paid information too. So I won't name off the courses, but they're not hard to find. I mean, you can do, a beginner's course. You can pay for, you could take the NASM personal training. That's going to give you a leg up when it comes to training and nutrition, right? So there's a lot of courses that are available. The biggest thing is too, one thing that I had to do, I had to coach for free for a while. My first 7 clients, I coached them for free just because I wanted to help people because I care. So a lot of times when you're starting out, and this goes for you're starting out in anything, a lot of times you have to just either work for free or as a favor, or maybe you're exchanging services, but you have to start somewhere, and that's the only way to start, really, in my opinion. Let's see what's next. What do you think separates people who truly transform from those who stay stuck? Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say two things. The biggest thing is going to be having the right mindset, perseverance, never quitting. The other thing is you have to be coachable. You have to be able to take constructive criticism, whether it's from your coach, whether it's from a second eye, whether it's from opposing coach. You have to be able to take constructive criticism. It might even be from the judges, right? If they give you an honest look, because when you are able to adapt and you take that criticism and you can even make it into a strength, that's that's essentially one thing that's going to really propel you in anything. Could be in bodybuilding or it could be in your career. If your job, if your boss pulls you aside and, he's like, hey, these are some of the things that we appreciate you at the workplace. Here's four things that we really need to improve on if you want that promotion. It's pretty obvious. If you don't work on those four things, you're not going to get promoted, right? You're not going to work your way to the top. So being able to accept the criticism, embrace it, and then find a solution on how to fix it, that's going to be the game changer. All right, what's next? Let's find another good one. What's one thing you wish every new competitor understood before signing up for a prep? Yeah, this one definitely hits. We've experienced this a lot, I would say this year and last year. And kind of touching back on the topic, I wish every newer competitor realized how difficult this actually was. You know, I've done 32 shows. Stephanie's done 20 shows. We've been around the game for a long time. We've worked with a lot of clients, a lot of them. And it's not easy. So that's one thing I wish that people understood. And, sometimes people, they realize that it's going to be hard because we have these conversations before we start prep or even towards the beginning of prep where we're talking over a game plan. We're talking about this and that, the cardio demands, the nutrition demands, the training, the posing, all of that stuff comes into play. And I think the people that realize that it is going to be hard, kind of going back a few questions ago, they don't realize just how hard it's going to be until they get there, until they really feel like just absolute trash. Now, for a seasoned competitor or someone that's competed a few times, you already know you expect it. Like you're going to feel like shit. You're going to feel run down. You're not going to hit a PR every week, right? It does become easier. It can become easier as long as you're adapting, evolving as a competitor. Most preps will get easier and easier if you're adapting. And that honestly just comes from the mindset, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, here's a good one. What's your take on couples doing prep together? We touched on this one on the last podcast with kind of a funny clip, but I will say from personal experience, I mean, if if you're a couple new or you've been together for a while, if you can get through prep, you can pretty much navigate through anything, right? So prep will challenge you like almost nothing else. So I think it can be a really great thing. Like me and Stephanie, we've done so many preps together, and there's just this unspoken understanding that hey, you feel like shit, you're a little run down, maybe you're a little less talkative. Just things that you know about your partner, right? This is a little different than someone that's, in a newer relationship, there's a lot of things that are going to come up. There's so many different weird things in prep that come up. I mean, just even just the tan, it's so strange to some people. Like you put what? Like body paint and this and that. It's just, Why does it look orange? Like there's so many different things. So overall, I think you take something that's really hard like prep and you can make it into a really, really positive experience and actually make your relationship stronger. So I think it's a good thing as long as you can navigate it and have open communication with your partner. All right, what's next? What's another good one? When it comes to athlete loyalty, what's your philosophy? Should clients explore other coaches or stay committed? We've dealt with this a lot in the last few years. We've had a massive client base, which we're very thankful for. But I think with social media, it has ruined part of the sport to where athletes are always kind of chasing the next fad. They're always trying to try something new. I forgot who said it on a different podcast, but when you're dealing with a good coach, a successful coach that you trust, there's no reason to jump ship. There's no reason to trust me, the grass is not always greener on the other side. It's there's so many different yeah, there's so much proof to that, especially when it comes to our athletes. But someone said it best, your coach, the longer they work with you, they are evolving their skills too. They're seeing how certain foods react to your body. They're seeing how the peak week went for this show and that show. They're seeing what they could have changed or maybe what they would have done next time. So the longer you're with a coach, hopefully you develop some type of, I guess, personal relationship. Not all coaches get to that personal level like me and Stephanie do, but it can help in the long run if it's someone that you really trust and you have that personal relationship, but you also have that coaching relationship. A good coach is always going to get better. I mean, always. The longer you work with a coach, especially if there's success. The most baffling thing I see in this sport, well, there's a couple, but I would say the most baffling thing I see is when a client from another coach, when they have success, whether they won an overall, they drop 75 pounds, they're in their best shape of their life, everything just seems to be going well for this client. They've gotten so much success with this coach, and then now the client wants to leave. It that doesn't make any sense to me when you've had all this success with a proven formula. That just doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you, more often than not, it just doesn't work out when they switch coaches. So it is what it is. Okay, what's next here as we wrap up? How should competitors handle comparison when scrolling through everyone else's physique online? Yeah, this is a good one. I feel like a lot of people kind of get sucked into this rabbit hole, especially too, like 2 days out from a show, one day out. This is the worst time to be online. This is the worst time. It's the worst time to drive up cortisol and make sure your physique is not going to be the best on stage. Because number one, you can't control another competitor, right? You can't control their peak. You can't control their genetics. You can't control how they're going to show up for game day. So if you can't control it, why worry about it? You just got to stay in your own lane. You got to worry about yourself. Got to worry about your own peak, right? It doesn't do any good to compare because at the end of the day, yes, this is a competition. We're all trying to win that first place, all of us. But when you're comparing one day out, you're trying to compare backstage, it just doesn't do any good because there's nothing you can do about it, you know? Okay, we'll wrap up with this one. What's the biggest green flag you look for in a client who wants to go pro? This is a great one that we talked about, me and Stephanie talked about. And sometimes we're kind of shocked and pleased when a new client is doing all the things and just going above and beyond. If you're someone like me or Stephanie, that when you got into this, all you want to do is learn, you were on the right track. So when someone is wanting to learn and they're doing those extra things to help them learn and grow as a competitor or as a person, that is the biggest green flag. When someone is coachable, when they're doing the extra things, they're going to the local shows to watch and learn, how are these athletes judged? How are these athletes compared? What's the criteria for the judging? When I see one of my clients and I always recommend it, hey, if you've never been to a show, which a lot of people haven't, you've never watched a show online, again, which a lot of people haven't, and they pay the 19.99 for that live stream of, the Arnold Classic or the New York Pro, whatever show it is, that tells me you're trying to learn and better yourself, and that is a huge red flag. So, tons of respect there. We do have a lot of clients that are trying to learn and better themselves. So, we always really appreciate that. All right, well, that wraps us up for today. Drop your comments, give us the questions in the comments section, and we will see you guys next time.